Hello everyone and welcome to a truly incredible match that is turning out to be the match of the century. Hans Niemann takes on Anish Giri, and it's a very interesting match. It features all of the time formats. They will play 12 blitz games, then 6 classical games, then 6 rapid games, and the winner gets $30,000. The loser also gets $20,000, so it's not about money, mostly about bragging rights, and in Hans's case also about winning some rating. In classical wouldn't be too terrible of an idea. He would have better chances of getting invited to top tier tournaments, as he is already over 2,700, and there aren't all that many people over 2,700. I think maybe at the time I'm making this video, some 37 people in the world are over 2,700. So we're gonna discuss the standings. We're gonna discuss the results. The blitz and classical games have already been played. They only have a day of rapid left, and Anish took the lead in the classical section by winning the first game. But in this video, I will show you game 3 and 4 of the match, and they're really something. So yeah, let's dive straight into it. Hans, with the white pieces, opens with pawn to e4. The games are being played in the Utrecht City Hall in Netherlands. So yeah, let's check it out. We have pawn to c5 by Anish, the Sicilian defense. Of course, it will be an Najdorf. Anish made a course on it, so of course he wants to promote it as much as he can. d4 captures. Knight f6, knight to c3, and a6. Anish goes for the knight of Sicilian, and Hans challenges it with bishop to d3. This is the 10th most popular continuation. So okay, if you want to challenge someone to a Najdorf, challenge it with the 10th most popular continuation. We have pawn to e5, knight d to e2, and bishop to e7. We have castles and bishop to e6. Okay, nothing new here, all been played before. Hans strikes with pawn to f4, and we have castles by Anish. We have pawn to a4, preparing to grab more space with a5, also stops pawn to b5, and queen to c7. We have king to h1, always a useful move whenever you have this diagonal opened up. Knight b to d7, developing, connecting rooks, announcing the knight probably is coming to c5, and there is a game where f5 was played, but Hans just plays bishop to e3, and it is now as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. Okay, rook a to c8, again, the pretty standard square for the rook in the Najdorf. Pawn to a5, now if the knight moves you might have to worry about some bishop to b6 ideas. Rook f to e8, and now pawn to h3. Pawn to h6 and queen to e1. Hans announces that he wants to play queen to g3, and so slowly build up an attack against the black king. We have knight to c5 by Anish. You move the knight, but okay, the b6 square is blocked. Queen to g3, and now just knight to h5. Kicks away Hans's queen. Queen back to f2, and now e captures on f4. And you're probably wondering whether to capture with the bishop or with the knight, as we prefer to keep the bishop pair. But no, Hans actually captures with the bishop. Makes it more uneven and more interesting. Knight captures, and now bishop to d8, freeing up the e file for the rook. And also, if the queen moves at some point, the a5 pawn might become a target. On the downside, you have disconnected your rooks once again, so you will have to connect them at some point. We have knight c to d5, where you would love to capture, but then the other knight just takes its place, and you've just given up the bishop pair. So queen to d7 by Anish, and queen to d4, a beautiful centralizing move by Hans. Bishop captures on d5, knight captures on d5, and now queen to e6. Preparing to put pressure on the d4 pawn, but it's not going to be easy. We have queen to b4, and now queen to g6. Okay, now the e4 pawn is attacked by 3 pieces, but if you move the knight from c5, then b7 hangs, and also the rooks are disconnected, so that's an issue for the moment. Hans just plays rook to f3. He says, oh, all right, I'm doubling up on the f-file, I'm going after your f7 pawn, defended only by the queen. So, of course, like I said, captures, runs into queen, captures on b7. Anish returns the rook to f8 to help out with the defense of the f7 pawn. Rook a to f1, and now bishop to g5, connecting the rooks once again, and the bishop here also nicely controls the knight on d5. Rook to g3, pinning the bishop, and just queen to e6. We have queen to d4, again centralizing the queen, and now Anish plays pawn to g6, and we reach the position from the thumbnail. Here, if you really want to keep it simple and keep it even, you have to give up a pawn by playing knight captures on d3, and now depending on what wide recaptures with, let's say c captures, you play pawn to f5. And now after captures, queen to e5, and this is how you... force a queen trade. The knight and rook are also attacked, so you have to trade queens. And after queen captures, pawn captures, okay, you're down a pawn, but you have a bishop versus a knight, game on both sides of the board. d3 and b2 are, you know, potential weaknesses for the rooks, so you would have compensation for the pawn. But after queen d4, Anish played pawn to g6, and he invited Hans to capture on g5. This is the position from the thumbnail, and Hans accepts the deadly dare. Rook captures on g5, h captures, and now knight to f6 check. It's not really an exchange sacrifice, since you will win the rook right back. And Anish has no choice but to, head straight into the windmill. And you cannot play king to g7. If you play king g7, then it's just a very, very quick checkmate. This is a double check. You move the king, queen h6 check, king to h5, and queen h7 will be checkmate. So instead, king to h8. Now you don't have a double check, but you do have a classical check, just going after the rook. Pawn to f6, and now knight captures on f8. We have rook captures and bishop to c4. Here, Hans playing with engine-like precision. He's just wants to hone in on that b7 weakness. Queen to e7, we have bishop to d5, knight to e6 attacking the queen, and queen to b6, preparing to capture on b7, and Anish goes for knight to f4. There's really no good active way to defend the b7 pawn, so you might as well go after the white king with some knight h5, knight to g3 ideas. Queen captures on b7, and now knight captures on d5 would be interesting. For example, knight captures, defends the queen, so you have to capture the knight, and you have this endgame, which is not fun, but probably your best choice. But, considering everything, and considering Anish is down to 4 minutes on the clock, he prefers to keep the tricky knight on the board, so he just goes queen e5, keeps all the material on the board. We have queen captures on a6, very boldly played by Hans, just grabbing a pawn, freeing up the a file to advance the passed pawn, and now the queen is also ready to jump back and help out with the defense of the bishop, as Anish's next move is pawn to f5, and Hans, of course, prepares queen to c4. The bishop will be nicely defended. We have knight to h5, threatening knight to g3 check to win the rook, and rook to f3. Knight to g3 check, king to g1, and now pawn to f4. We have king to f2 by Hans. Now you don't have to worry about any tricky checks by the knight, and king to h7. If you capture on b2, then you just allow a queen trade, and it's game over. Just captures, and you advance the pawn to victory, as the bishop already covers the a8 square. So after king f2, king to h7, and now pawn to c3. Now Hans is just ready to start advancing those passed pawns to victory. We have queen to e7, queen to b4. We have pawn to g4, and now the position is completely winning. Hans did make it very, very complicated, but it still is winning if you find Hans's idea. So feel free to pause the video and try to find, the move that wins the game while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on not going for the boring idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is queen to b7, sacrificing a full rook, to start advancing your passed pawn. And there's no way to defend this. The only way is to trade queens. Queen captures on b7, bishop captures, and Anish takes the rook on f3. G captures on f3, and now G captures on f3. This is key. You cannot just start advancing the pawn. If you advance the pawn, then f captures on g2, a7, and f3, and black will just give the rook back, and the two connected passed pawns will be winning for black. Something like a8 queen, knight to h1 check, king to e1, f2 check, king to d2, and now you just pick up the queen, and I mean, of course, the two connected passed pawns are winning. So G captures on f3 is key here. We have pawn to d5, a very tricky move by Anish. He knows he's lost, but even with a minute on the clock, he finds tricky moves. Now, if pawn captures, then rook e8, and you cannot escape a draw. Point being that, let's say a6, rook gives a check, king to g1, and you just continue checking the white king. So after d5, Han says, all right, I'm just going to play bishop captures on d5. I mean, I wasn't born yesterday. I like my bishop here defended, and now I'm just going to advance the pawn to victory. Knight to h5 and pawn to a6. We have knight to f6, bishop to c6, not allowing the knight to be traded for the bishop. Knight to e8 and pawn to b4. We have knight to c7, pawn to b5, and rook to f6, going after the bishop. Pawn to a7, and now rook captures on c6 banish. The problem is, if you allow b6, then the two connected pass pawns, are just two connected pass pawns, like king g7, b6 attacks the knight. Even if rook captures on c6, just b7. I mean, this is completely winning for white. So after a7, rook captures on c6, b captures, and now pawn to g5. Okay, Anish is now up on knight, but Hans has all of these pawns. So king to e2, king to g6. It's time to get the king into the game. King to d3, king to f6, king to c4, king to e7, king to c5, and now knight to a8. We have pawn to c7. Beautiful move by Hans, freeing up the c6 square for the king, and now king to d7. The problem with capturing with the knight is that you win the c6 square with the king, and after king d8, there's e5. I mean, there are so many pass pawns here. You just can't stop all of them. For example, knight e8, pawn to e6, knight to c7, e7 check, and doesn't really matter what you play. Captures, a8 brings a queen into the game. So after c7, king to d7, guarding the queening square, but now c8 queen. Hans just giving up material to win that c6 square for his king. King captures, king to c6, and knight to c7. And even though it seems like Anish's knight has everything under control, too many pass pawns. e5, knight to a8, we have pawn to e6, king to d8, and now king to b7. And he was in this position on move 62 that Anish Giri resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Once you move the knight, let's say knight to c7, e7 with check. And now you either promote this pawn, or you capture with the king, and then you pick up the knight, or you play king to d7, and then you play e8 queen. Doesn't matter if knight captures, then this pawn queens. If king captures, then you capture the knight and this pawn queens. Whatever you try will be winning for Hans. So this is the third game where Hans had the white pieces. Now let's check out the other game. This is game 4, where Anish had the white pieces, and this game is, this is absolutely brutal. So let's check it out. Anish now with white opens with pawn to d4. We have knight to f6, and now pawn to c4. Pawn to e6, knight f3, pawn to d5, and Anish says, all right, it's the time for games is over, let's go for the Catalan. Pawn to g3. And in the previous video, I mentioned that no one knows how to play the Catalan, and the Catalan between top grandmasters just always is such an interesting game. And here we have a similar line like we had in that game. Bishop to b4 check, bishop to d2, bishop back to e7, and now bishop to g2. We have castles kingside by both of them, and now knight b to d7. We have queen to c2 and pawn to c6. And now rook to d1. Bishop to f4 is more popular, but rook to d1 also very much played. Pawn to b6 by Hans, bishop to c3, and now knight to e4, going after the bishop on c3. And there is a game where knight to e5 was played, but Anish wants to keep the bishop pair. He plays bishop back to e1. And it is now, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game. Hans goes bishop to b7, knight b to d2, and pawn to f5, just cementing the knight on e4. We have pawn to b4 by Anish, and bishop to f6. We have pawn to a4, Anish playing this beautifully, just grabbing more space on the queen side. Queen to e7, developing the queen. Hans connects the rooks, and now knight to b3. The pawn on b4 is under attack, but not really. There's no reason to defend it right away. a5 is the best move here. Point is that if you capture on b4, then knight captures and you resign. So after knight to b3, Hans just gets an opportunity to completely open up the position and make his light square bishop a useful piece. So d captures on c4, queen captures on c4, and now pawn to c5. And this is already on move 16, as black against the Catlin, having your light square bishop freed like this is, well, that's the dream. B captures on c5, and now an in-between move, bishop to d5, a nice Zwischenzug. Queen c2, and b captures on c5. We have rook 8 to b1, and pawn to c4. And all of a sudden, it's move 19. You feel like something has gone wrong for white here. Hans already has a passed pawn on c4. He has the bishop pair that is, well, almost fully operational. This bishop is a beautiful piece. The bishop on f6 is very useful, even though for the moment blocked by the d4 pawn. The rooks have a very, very natural way of entering the game, and you can pretty much choose how to develop this knight. Knight b to d2, and rook f to c8. You always have to put the rook behind the passed pawn. That's how chess works. Knight to f1, and now knight back to d6. We have rook b to c1, and knight to b6. A very tricky move by Hans, inviting pawn to a5, and it's unclear what Hans had in mind if pawn to a5 is played. And here Anish should really just go bishop to b4 and pin that knight. But he does go pawn to a5, and now he